Hello, nerds. Nerds for Humanity. I have got quite a show for you today. If you are a true policy nerd, you're going to love this. If you're not, this may not be the live stream for you because we're going to go over the 2021 U.S. National Annual Threat Assessment of the U.S. Intelligence Community. My God, I can't speak today. And this was kind of controversial because if you might remember during the Trump era, this was a report that was often kind of suppressed. And for some reason, they didn't really want to talk about it that much. But we're going to talk about it because it's important to think about, like, beyond COVID, what are the challenges facing this country and the world? So we're going to unpack it together, get your input, get your thoughts, your comments. But before we get started, let's get Andrew and friends to warm us up.
There's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the gang gang. Drew gang gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew gang gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew gang gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew.
Hello, nerds. Nerds for Humanity. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Playing with some sound effects today. We're going to go into what are the biggest threats facing this country according to the U.S. intelligence community. And without further ado, let's just get into the details because this is how we do it. Okay. There it is, folks. I'm guessing there's not a whole lot of people that are as keen into this topic as the Nerds for Humanity community. But, you know, we talk about COVID and we talk about, obviously, all of the police issues, the white nationalism. But, you know, there's actually other threats on top of that, as if that weren't enough. So let's get into what ails the U.S. in terms of challenges facing this country. But before we do that, I just want to say hi to Elizabeth Norris, who was the first person to say hi in the chat. And then Reach Communications is joining us from California. Elizabeth, remind me, where are you at? I'm joining you from Northern California. Nothing against Southern California, but I really like Northern California. I just moved here this summer, and I am freaking loving it. Okay, so let's get into it. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, April 9th, 2021. So this is kind of pretty hot off the presses. So this is a report of the worldwide threats to the national security of the United States, and it reflects the collective insights of the IC, the intelligence community. Elizabeth Norris is joining us from Michigan. Welcome, Elizabeth. Focuses on the most direct and serious threats to the United States during the next year. So if you really want to know what we should be worried about, this report could be useful. This will be provided to the Congressional Intelligence Committee as well as the Armed Services of the House of Representatives and the Senate. All right. Elizabeth says she has a daughter in Cali and she loves it there too. I know. The sunshine alone, just makes you happy. All right, let's get into what are the biggest things facing our great nation. And even before we read it, can I just say thank you, Jesus, that we have a full-grown adult in the Oval Office with a competent team around him, as opposed to that terrible orange psychopath. In the coming year, the U.S. and its allies will face a diverse array of threats playing out amidst the global disruption resulting from COVID, against the backdrop of great power competition, disruptive effects of ecological degradation, and changing climate. Look at this. The U.S. Intelligence Committee is calling out in the first sentence ecological degradation and a changing climate. Now, I know there's a lot of radical MAGA folks who are like, well, who knows? You know, the science isn't clear. We don't really know if the climate's changing, or we don't know if man caused any of it. Doesn't matter, dude. It's here. Any rate, if you agree that the intelligence community is not crazy, maybe ecological degradation and changing climate should be a concern. Increasing number of empowered non-state actors, rapidly evolving technology, the complexity of threats, intersections, and potential for cascading events in an increasingly interconnected and mobile world create new challenges for the IC. Ecological and climate changes, for example, are connected to public health risks, humanitarian concerns, social and political instability, and geopolitical rivalry. Remember those days when people would say, well, who cares about the spotted owl? Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill. Remember that was the official Palin plan for the environment? Well, I think now, according to the United States intelligence community, those ecological and climate changes are connected to public health. You know, probably a lot of viruses in the world have been historically kind of cordoned off in vastly undeveloped areas. When we keep, as a species, cutting down forests and ecological environments, and we keep mixing humans with all these other natural species, there's going to be more viruses that probably make it into our cities and our suburbs. Humanitarian concerns, social and political instability. I mean, you look at our southern border and you think about what's going on in like Central America, and you can't just look the other way. Like, whether you like it or not, people will migrate. They may migrate because of extreme climate. They may migrate because of instability in their country. But this is the real deal. Let's see. Let's move on. Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang have demonstrated the capability and intent to advance their interests at the expense of the United States and its allies despite the pandemic. China increasingly is a near-peer competitor, challenging the U.S. economically, militarily, and technologically, and is pushing to change global norms. Russia is pushing back against Washington where it can globally, employing techniques up to and including the use of force. Iran will remain a regional menace. North Korea will be a disruptive player on the regional and world stages. COVID-19 will continue to strain governments and societies, fueling humanitarian and economic crises, unrest, geopolitical competition, as countries such as China and Russia seek advantage through avenues such as vaccine diplomacy. No country has been completely spared. Remember a year ago when there was about half the country that said COVID-19 was just a hoax, or it was just the flu? People were being remember when President Trump was saying, well, doctors are just marking people as having COVID because they can bill more for the insurance companies. And here we are looking at the annual threat assessment of the United States intelligence community saying, no, this COVID-19 thing is for real, and it's a global issue. Ecological degradation and climate change will fuel disease outbreaks, threaten food and water security, and exacerbate political instability and humanitarian crises. Great. The scourge of illicit drugs and transnational organized crime will continue to take its toll on American lives, prosperity, and safety. Emerging and disruptive technologies and proliferation and permeation of technology in all aspects of our lives pose unique challenges. Cyber capabilities, to illustrate, are demonstrably intertwined with threats to our infra and foreign malign influence threats against our democracy, like Russia. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Iran continue to plot terrorist attacks like, geez, as if this weren't enough, we still have to deal with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Iran, for crying out loud. Regional conflicts fuel humanitarian crises, undermine stability, and threaten U.S. persons and interests. Golly. So basically, it's rough, and then it starts off with a breakdown of the Chinese push for global power. You know, this is, we are now entering a world where potentially for a long time, many of us here in the U.S. enjoyed a very amazing time where the Soviet Union was no longer our biggest threat. It kind of imploded, and the U.S. was the lone superpower. And I think this this threat assessment is going to say, well, there is a new player on the world stage, and we are no longer alone. So let's break into the specifics of the threat from China. And, you know, on this show, we're going to try and assess that threat and competition from China in a very clear-eyed way. And we'll try to do it in a less emotional way than the previous president, who would love to talk about, oh, they're ripping us off and they're laughing at us, blah, blah. Let's just look at the facts. I actually think in some ways Trump may have underplayed the realities of a rising China and made it so that it seemed like you could fix, or you could kind of go back in time by just negotiating a great trade deal with China. And I suspect, I haven't read this report yet, but I suspect what this report is going to say is that they are not going away. They're the real deal, and we need to figure out a way to thrive and maintain our leadership position in the international community, knowing that China will continue to grow. But before we get into the details of China, Russia, and the climate risks, I do want to briefly thank the people who make this channel possible and make this this content possible. So let me thank our members. And the first one, I want to thank Soldier One, who is our new highest level member, a senior vice president. So thank you, Soldier One. Let me give you a little bell for that. All of the membership dues from this channel just go to paying for streaming software, podcast hosting fees, email fees, and then anything left over is going to go towards marketing and promotion of the Nerds channel, so we can get hopefully a bigger audience over time and then attract even bigger name guests. So as an example, I'm trying to get the person who is let's see, running the Yang Super PAC. And, you know, I haven't been successful yet, but I bet you if I had more subscribers, we would be able to get her on. Let me see if I can find, yeah. Oh, well, I'm also trying to get Grace for NY, Grace Meng, onto the show. Haven't been able to get Grace on yet, but I think her team, if they saw that the Nerds channel had more subs, they may be more likely to join. So, and then the Super PAC lady, where was she? Liz Smith. Trying to get Liz Smith on here, who used to work for Buttigieg, and see, it's me saying, hey, can you come on to the show? So, at any rate, thank you so much to Soldier One, who makes this content possible and is our senior vice president. At the VP level, we have VLAM, JM. Oh, let me move myself, covering everybody's name. There we go. We have VLAM, JM Sap, Fat Lamb, Kristen Slevin, who is also a longtime member, Laura Lane, Patrick Dunn, Bike, and Mindful Skeptics. So thank you to our vice presidents. And the next level is our hardcore. Mike Chang, Gene Lim, David, Tracy, DK, Phoenix, Jekalego, Kirsch, Mr. History, Byram, Mona, Susan, Yang, Tony, Robert, Dean, Stat, Jalessa, Jay Perrin, Jay Bryan, Vivian, Dana, Flavio, Yoda Fanny, and Jason. And at our entry level, anybody watching this now can just click that join link, and it's like $2 a month is the entry level. So super reasonable. Helen, Lisa, Sugar, Albert, Brandon, Yes, Brian, Peter, Arez, Your Maman, Sophia, Jedwiga, Gail, Shake, Mike, Doris, Emerald, Lori, Ben, Roger, Lisa, Christina, Vaughn, Rasta, Richard, Jessica, James, Jalopy, Emma, Spirited Way, Stephen, Ira, Shoni, Philip, Jameson, Doctor, William, Karen, Monica, Alex, Ardent, Mai, Semery, David, Ender, Brittany, Clyde, Juana, Sasha, Warren. All right, and to our newest members overall, our newest members, Warren, Yoda, Jason, Flavio, and Sasha, all less than 30 days old. Okay, let's now get back onto the national threat assessment. China. All right. China's push for global power. Let's see here. The CCP will continue its whole of government efforts to spread China's influence, undercut that of the U.S., and drive wedges between Washington and its allies and partners. And foster new international norms that favor the authoritarian Chinese system. Chinese leaders probably will, however, seek tactical opportunities to reduce tensions with Washington when such opportunities suit their interests. China will maintain its major innovation and industrial policies because Chinese leaders see this strategy as necessary to reduce dependence on foreign technologies, enable military advances, and sustain economic growth, and ensure the Chinese Communist Party's survival. Beijing sees increasingly competitive U.S.-China relations as part of an epical geopolitical shift, and views Washington's economic measures against Beijing as part of a broader U.S. effort to contain the rise of China. China is touting its success containing the COVID-19 pandemic as evidence of the superiority of its system, and Beijing is increasingly combining its military power with economic, technological, and diplomatic clout. All right, so then you've got China-India border tensions. You've got South China Sea, claiming land in the South China Sea. You got the pressure on Taiwan. And then, interesting, you got China's increasing cooperation with Russia on the areas of complementary interests, including defense and economic cooperation. Yikes. That's all we need. China and Russia getting together. Jeez. Beijing will continue to promote its Belt and Road Initiative, remain top threat to U.S. technological competitiveness. Military capabilities. Continue pushing its goals of becoming a great power, securing what it views as its territory, and establishing preeminence in regional affairs. Continue the most rapid expansion and platform diversification of its nuclear arsenal, doubling the size of its nuclear stockpile, is not interested in arms control agreements, will not agree to negotiations that lock in U.S. and Russian competitive advantages. Space. Beijing is working to match or exceed U.S. capabilities to gain military, economic, and prestige benefits that Washington has accrued from space leadership. Jesus. Counter space operations will be integral to potential military campaigns. Cyber. China presents a prolific and effective cyber espionage threat. Yikes. Substantial cyber attack capabilities. Increase the threats of cyber attacks against the U.S. homeland. Suppression of U.S. web content that Beijing views as threatening to its internal ideological control. Election interference. China will continue expanding its global footprint. Beijing has been intensifying efforts to shape the political environment in the U.S. to promote its policy preferences, mold public discourse, and pressure political figures whom Beijing believes oppose its interests, and muffle criticism on China on issues of religious freedom and suppression of democracy in Hong Kong. In some ways, you could say there wasn't a whole lot of criticism of China, religious freedom and suppression of democracy in Hong Kong by the last president, Donald J. Trump. I don't think he really cared about that. So in some ways, Trump was doing what his lack of statements about that probably pleased the Chinese Communist Party. But if that were not enough, enter Russia. Golly. If COVID and the rise of competition from China is not enough, our buddies in Moscow are still, Vladimir Putin is not going anywhere, and neither is the premier of China, who has a is it Xi Jinping? Yeah, he has like a lifetime. I think he has like a lifetime term. Maybe that's why he and Trump got along so well. At any rate, the three of them, they are little pigs in a blanket. I hope I hope that doesn't get me in trouble when I travel internationally, that I called Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Donald J. Trump three pigs in a blanket. Any rate, Moscow will continue to employ a variety of tactics this year to undermine U.S. influence, develop new international norms, divide Western countries, weaken Western alliances, and demonstrate Russia's ability to shape global events. Russia will continue to develop military, nuclear, space, cyber, and intelligence capabilities while actively engaging abroad and leveraging its energy resources to advance its agenda and to undermine the United States. We expect Moscow. I wonder if this, maybe this kind of stuff is why Trump was always trying to suppress the national threat assessment, because it does highlight. He would always say Russia, 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 right? Now here's like very specifics about why Russia is a threat. Russian officials have long believed that the United States is conducting its own influence campaigns to undermine Russia, to weaken Vladimir Putin, and install Western-friendly regimes in the states of the former Soviet Union. In fairness, I would not be surprised if that is true, that we are conducting influence campaigns to weaken Putin. I mean, let's be real. It's not like the U.S. doesn't involve itself in other countries' affairs when we feel like it's in our interests. But nonetheless, it looks like Russia is trying to do the same thing to us, and Russia seeks an accommodation with the U.S. on mutual non-interference in both countries' domestic affairs. Now that's a really interesting point. Maybe the reason the Russians keep messing around with our elections is because they want us to stay out of their affairs. So that's possible. That's possible. Hey, Lukey Monster. Oops. Did I do that? There we go. Cool. All right. Russia seeks an accommodation so that regional global activities. We assess that. Oh, Emily Kingslay's in the house. Haven't seen you in a while, Emily. Welcome back. We assess that Moscow will employ an array of tools, especially influence campaigns, intelligence, counterterrorism cooperation, military aid, mercenary operations, assassinations, and arms sales to advance its interests or undermine the interests of the United States. We expect Moscow to insert itself into crises when Russian interests are at stake. It can turn a power vacuum into an opportunity, or the anticipated costs of action are low. We assess the FSB, the Federal Security Service, organized the assassination of a Chechen separatist in a Berlin park in 2019, and then tried to kill opposition activist Alexei Navalny inside of Russia with a fourth-generation chemical agent. If I know Trump and Putin are friends, but if those are friends, who needs freaking enemies? In the Middle East and North Africa, Russia is using its involvement in Syria and Libya to increase its clout, undercut American leadership, present itself as an indispensable mediator, and gain military access and economic opportunities. In the Western Hemisphere, Russia has expanded its engagement with Venezuela, supported Cuba, and used arms sales and energy agreements to expand access to markets in Latin America. In the former Soviet Union, Moscow is well positioned to increase its role in the Caucasus, intervene in Belarus if it deems necessary, continuing destabilization efforts against Ukraine, while settlement talks remain stalled. Since 2006, Russia has used energy as a foreign policy tool to coerce cooperation and force states to the negotiating table. For example, Russia cut off gas to Ukraine in 2009, affecting some parts of Europe for a 13-day period. We expect Moscow's military posture and behavior, including military modernization, to challenge the interests of the United States and its allies. Moscow has the wherewithal to deploy forces in strategically important regions. But the farther it deploys from Russia, the less able it will be to sustain intensive combat operations. So that's good news that they can't really project their power, at least not at the moment. Private and military security companies managed by Russian oligarchs close to Kremlin extend military reach at low cost. Yeah, maybe this is why they kind of focus on undermining like people's elections, because they don't really have the military strength that we do. WMD. Russia will remain the largest and most capable WMD rival to the United States for the foreseeable future as it expands and modernizes its nuclear weapons capabilities. Russia also remains a nuclear material security concern despite improvements to physical security at Russian nuclear sites. Cyber. We assess that Russia will remain a top cyber threat as it refines and employs its espionage, influence, and attack capabilities. Intelligence, influence operations, elections, influence, and interference. Okay, Russia presents one of the most serious intelligence threats to the United States, using its intelligence services and influence tools to divide Western alliances, preserve its influence in the post-Soviet area, and increase its sway around the world while undermining U.S. global standing, sowing discord within the United States, and influencing U.S. voters and decision-making. Moscow almost certainly views U.S. elections as an opportunity to try and undermine U.S. global standing, sow discord, influence U.S. decision-making, and sway American voters. Moscow conducted influence operations against U.S. elections in 2016, 2018, and 2020. So that's not like Moscow may have, or we believe that Moscow may have been tempted to. Moscow conducted influence operations against American elections in 2016, 2018, and 2020. So I know if the radical MAGA folks want to keep talking about any talk of Russia is simply an effort to undermine President Trump. Look, Trump's out of office. He lost, as you know. I know many MAGA people don't believe that, but he did lose. And still, the U.S. intelligence community believes that Russia is a threat and that they were interfering and conducting influence operations in this country to affect our democracy. So think about that. And what did our former president do? Zero. Anyway, space. Russia will remain a key space competitor, maintaining a large network of recon, comms, and navigation satellites. Russia continues to train its military space elements and field new anti-satellite weapons to degrade U.S. space capabilities, developing, testing, and fielding an array of non- and destructive counter-space weapons, including jamming and cyberspace capabilities, directed energy weapons, on-orbit capabilities, and ground-based anti-satellite capabilities targeting U.S. and allied satellites. All right. Iran. So we hit China. Then we talked about our buddy Vladimir. So we got Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and now we have our friends, the Shah of Iran, the all-holy one. Iran will present a continuing threat to U.S. interests as it tries to erode U.S. influence and support Shia populations abroad. Iran sees itself as locked in a struggle with the U.S. and its allies, whom they perceive to be focused on curtailing Iran's influence. Tehran's actions will reflect its perceptions of U.S., Israeli, and Gulf state hostility. Iran's willingness to conduct attacks will probably hinge on its perception of the U.S. willingness to respond, its ability to conduct attacks without triggering direct conflict. Regime leaders probably will be reluctant to engage diplomatically in talks with the U.S. in the near term without sanctions or humanitarian relief, or the U.S. rejoining the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Iran remains committed to countering U.S. pressure. Great. Iran will remain a problematic actor in Iraq. Iran is determined to maintain influence in Syria. Iran will remain a destabilizing force in Yemen. Jesus, Iran, come on. Tehran remains a threat to Israel. Iran will hedge its bets in Afghanistan, and its actions may threaten instability. Diverse military capabilities will continue to pose a threat. We assess that Iran remains interested in developing networks inside the U.S., an objective it has pursued for more than a decade. But the greatest risk to U.S. persons exists outside the homeland, particularly in the Middle East and South Asia. Nuclear breakout. Iran is not currently undertaking key U.S. weapons development activities. However, following the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA agreement in 2018, thank you, President Trump. Really great job there. Iranian officials have abandoned some of Iran's commitments and resumed some nuclear activities that exceed the JCPOA limits. Iran's expertise and willingness to conduct cyber make it a significant threat. God. Oh, and then on to North Korea. Mother truckers. It's freaking exhausting, all of the challenges facing this country. It's freaking exhausting. It's like enough issues with this freaking pandemic, and then we have a whole host of characters from China to Russia to Iran and North Korea, and we haven't talked about climate change and ecological disasters and freaking humanitarian disasters from mass migration, which is a great segue to talking about why we need better leadership in this country so that we don't have people only like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert making a lot of noise in Congress. Time for the pitch for ofthepeople.us. Ofthepeople.us, a nonprofit that is co-founded by myself and a few other folks who are all volunteering our time to build this little website. And the whole point is to allow more local candidates to get discovered and get support and get volunteers so that those local candidates someday become future congressional leaders, future Senate leaders, maybe future presidential candidates. But it all starts at that grassroots level. So, as an example, Sass is running for the U.S. House of Representatives. He is pro-UBI, pro-star voting, pro-Green New Deal, pro-universal health care. You can learn more about him at ofthepeople.us. We've got Sammy Ravello running for Bronx Borough President, trying to get money out of politics. He is a former NYPD, also working class DR immigrant, son of working class DR immigrants. He's a veteran, Latino, also pro-UBI. Justin Foster is running for county clerk, a recovering Republican who sees UBI as a way to achieve conservative principles. Christy Seelock, running for state representative in Oklahoma. So tons of great candidates, and two things I would ask you to do. One is, if you see anyone running for office, please ask them to list themselves on ofthepeople.us. It's free. And if you are thinking of supporting local candidates, know that a lot of these folks that are running for really local offices like Bronx Borough President, like county clerk, like state representative, a small donation to these candidates and campaigns can make a huge difference. Because this is not like running for president, right? This is not even like running for Congress for some of these folks. So this is an opportunity to think about how we start change at the grassroots level. All right, so that's my little public service announcement supporting ofthepeople.us. And by the way, thank you to all the people that do support OTP, not only our volunteer tech team, but also a number of financial supporters, including the one and only Eric Sanchez, former communications lead for Yang 2020, who is a great supporter of OTP, so appreciate it. All right, now let's move on back to all of the threats facing this country. Oh, Nell, by the way, if you end up running for office, you better list yourself on OTP. Are you down with OTP? Yeah, you know me. All right, here we go. North Korea. We assess that Kim views nuclear weapons as the ultimate deterrent against foreign intervention, and he may take a number of aggressive and destabilizing actions to reshape the regional environment and drive wedges between the U.S. and its allies, including the resumption of nuclear weapons and ICBM testing. He also aims to achieve his goals of gaining prestige, security, and acceptance through conventional military modernization efforts. You know how to increase Kim's prestige? For the first time ever, have a sitting U.S. president shake his hand on North Korean soil and meet with him with no compromises, with no requirements. Really wonderful job, President Trump. Really great. Freaking amateur. Anyway, military capabilities. North Korea will pose an increasing threat, improve its conventional WMD. Because Kim remains strongly committed to nuclear weapons, the country is actively engaged in ballistic missile research, and Pyongyang's CBW efforts persist. Cyber poses a growing espionage threat and attack threat. So that's North Korea. Oh, but wait, there's more. Oh, yes. Listen to Elizabeth Norris in Michigan. She knows. Please give this video a thumbs up and share it. And this is only on YouTube, so tweet it out as well, because the Twitter people have no idea that we're live right now. Let me just hold on one second. I should probably tweet it out myself. Okay, done. All right, COVID-19. The pandemic is raising geopolitical tensions. Great powers are jockeying for advantage. The economic fallout is likely to create instability in at least a few and many countries as people grow more desperate in the face of interlocking pressures that include sustained downturns, job losses, and disrupted supply chains. Gross. The resurgence in infections early this year may have an even greater economic impact as struggling businesses in hard-hit sectors face increasing budget strains. The effects on developing countries, especially those that rely heavily on remittances, tourism, or oil exports, will be severe and long-lasting. The economic fallout, along with conflict and weather extremes, has driven food insecurity worldwide to its highest point in more than a decade. Okay? The economic fallout from the pandemic, along with conflict and weather extremes, has driven food insecurity worldwide to its highest point in more than a decade. The number of people experiencing high levels of acute food instability doubled from 135 million to 270 million last year, and is projected to rise to 330 million by year's end. 330 million people experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity. Now, if you don't think that that is going to cause new waves of migration and desperate people trying to get out of their desperate situation, you're mistaking yourself. And building a wall is not going to solve that problem, right? Now, this is where you would hope other countries would think about basic income as well. And you would hope that other countries, including the United States, would start taking action on climate change so we don't keep destroying this planet and unleashing new viruses on ourselves, as well as causing hundreds of millions of people to potentially run out of water and have high levels of acute food insecurity. 330 million people in a few months. Crazy. COVID is prompting shifts in security priorities for countries around the world. COVID-related disruptions to essential health services, such as vaccinations, aid delivery, and maternal and child health programs, will increase the likelihood of additional health emergencies, especially among vulnerable populations in low-income countries. As an example, the pandemic has disrupted HIV/AIDS treatments and preventative measures in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as measles and polio vaccinations in dozens of countries. Guys, measles and polio. This is why everyone needs to get COVID vaccinated. Because if we still have measles and polio in some countries, stuff that was like middle of the 20th century for us in America, if the rest of the world is still replicating and obviously potentially mutating measles and polio, think about COVID when something like 50% of, in the greatest, most modern country in the world, with the best science leaders and innovation in the world, where half of the Republican Party refuses to get vaccinations, you're asking to become hosts and replication centers for COVID-19, such that those of us who have gotten vaccinated, if the darn thing triple mutates, shoot, we're all screwed. So please, get vaccinated, wear a mask, distance, so that we can freaking nip this damn virus in the bud. Now, the problem is, even if we all Americans cooperate and do the right thing, unfortunately, we have to worry about Brazil and the rest of the world where they're not getting enough vaccines. And again, the virus will continue to replicate. And if it mutates enough, it's not clear that the current vaccinations will be future-proof. Okay, climate change and environmental degradation. This is a very depressing live stream. I'm sorry, nerds. I'm not here to make you sad or angry. But we gotta keep it real. We got some real freaking problems. This is why we can't spend, thank God, thank you, Jesus, that we are not spending all day with Donald Trump tweeting his random shite, because we have real problems and we need grown-ups to help solve this. We assess that the effects of changing climate and environmental degradation will create a mix of direct and indirect threats, including risks to the economy, heightened political volatility, human displacement, and new venues for geopolitical competition. 2020 tied for the hottest year on record, following a decade of rising temperatures from 2010 to 2019. Arctic sea ice minimum coverage reached its second lowest level on record, highlighting the increasing accessibility of resources and sea lanes in a region where competition is ratcheting up among US, China, and Russia. Hottest year on record, a decade of rising temperatures, and still some radical MAGA's belief is what's more important is that I have the right to a fully automatic machine gun, and I don't really care about the climate. Which is so sad, because a lot of the radical MAGA people are hunters, and they know what it's like in the outdoors. So you would think they would care more than Democrats or people living in cities about the environment. But for some reason, you're not hearing a lot of pro-environment stuff coming out of radical MAGA. In 2020, 6 Atlantic storms passed a rapid intensification threshold because of warming temperatures, representing more damaging storms that offer less time for populations, as well as American military installations to evacuate. Okay? This is not like Greenpeace saying this. Right, guys? This is the military-industrial complex, the U.S. intelligence community, the annual threat assessment is saying that just last year, 6 storms passed a rapid intensification threshold because of warming temperatures, representing more damaging storms that offer less time for evacuation and preparation, including at U.S. military installations. Is that some tree hugger saying this, wearing Birkenstocks and having like flowers in their hair? No, man, this is serious problems. These are serious issues. When the military-industrial complex thinks that climate is a problem, I think we can cease with the debate about whether climate change is real. Anybody who keeps saying, oh, I don't know, the science is inconclusive, it's like, have you met a scientist? Have you actually met someone that has studied science? Now, for all the radical MAGA that are all worked up about the southern border and about the crisis of migrants, this bullet point is for you. The 2020 storm season hit Central America particularly hard. The region already was suffering from several years of alternating drought and storms, increasing the potential for large-scale migration from the region as pandemic-related restrictions on movement ease. You got that, radical MAGA? You all talk about immigration as your number one issue. The crisis on the southern border. Why won't Biden go to the southern border? Well, let me ask you something. Why do you think there's all these people showing up on the southern border? It's not because, they think that Biden is like their savior. It's because their countries have been suffering from years of alternating drought and storms and flooding, which is basically, if you were in their situation, wouldn't you seek a better life? All right. You're not going to listen because you don't care. I don't know. Because that's just too complicated. It's not as easy to say as build that wall. But the reality is, when you have a planet that is killing itself, people will want to move. And if you want to protect America's prosperity, you've got to do a number of things, like take climate change seriously and take active measures in cooperation. I said that word, cooperation with the international community to address it. Don't pull out of the Paris Climate Accords. Don't cut funding from the EPA. Don't talk about drill, baby, drill, like coal is like the answer to all your problems. And try and figure out a way for some economic sustainability for our neighbors, because it's in everyone's interest for Central America to thrive. We don't have the capability to support everyone from Central America coming into this country. So try and help them where they are. All right. Air pollution was the fourth leading risk factor for premature death globally, and resulting in 7 million deaths, and has been found to increase the susceptibility and severity of COVID-19. Despite temporary improvements in air quality resulting from COVID-19 lockdowns, by September, air pollution had returned to pre-pandemic levels. The threat from climate change will intensify because global energy usage and related emissions continue to increase, putting Paris Agreement goals at risk. All right. Golly. I think I'm exhausted with all of these freaking threats facing this country, facing the world, for Christ's sake. Like, seriously. So let's summarize here. You've got China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. You've got COVID instability and mutations. You've got climate and ecological disasters causing new migrant panic. So thank you, Jesus, again, that we don't have Donald Trump running things, because I don't think he would have figured any of this out or even read this report. But hopefully Biden can do something about it. I mean, with regards to China, Russia, and North Korea, part of me feels like, man, we have our own problems right now here, and we should engage with them in a constructive way, but I don't know that would be my top priority. And I hope Biden's really just focusing on the U.S. recovery from COVID, which I think is his plan. And I'm glad he's rejoining the Paris Climate Accords. And I would love for Biden to experiment and pilot. Ooh, here's an idea. What if Biden said, you know, all this foreign aid that we give countries, rather than giving it to corrupt governments to line their pockets, we're going to continue to give aid, but we want that aid in the form of a universal basic income. That would be cool. Now, of course, some people here will say, gosh, darn it, how can you sponsor UBI in other countries? Well, we're not going to pay for an entire national UBI, let's say, program for, say, Honduras or whatever. But we could subsidize it in a small Honduras city. We would learn something. It would benefit the people there. They'd be less likely to need to migrate. And who knows, maybe that could be the beginning of something, like a whole set of things. At any rate, let me know in the comments if you think that's an interesting idea. But I do want to tell you that I very much appreciate everybody for joining this ultra nerdy live stream, because I know it got pretty dense there. But it is important to get out of the whole, it's not only about the Second Amendment, and it's not only about COVID. We've got a complicated world. Let's see. We've got some chat comments. Nell is saying, hey, did you see Glenn Beck was talking about UBI? No, I didn't, but I'm not surprised, because I do feel that if you are a real conservative, where you believe that large government bureaucracies are generally inefficient, then why wouldn't you support UBI? So I'm glad that some people on the right are starting to think about it. Let me see if there's any other comments. If you have, Nell likes the animated background. And TMC is saying, yeah, don't forget about destroying the rainforests, which are like the lungs of the planet. I agree. Yes, TMC's very good point. Please hit the like button. Thank you, TMC. You can be a serious and rock a flower crown. And this is true. You can. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to tell you I'm looking forward to next week. I think I'm going to have, let me see who I've got coming on next week, because I feel like we have some external guest kind of featured interviews. Thank you for the likes, guys. Let's see. Next week, maybe it's the first. Hold on. Sarah Pierce from the MPI, which stands for Migration Policy Institute. Yes. So on, it's going to be May 2nd, Sunday, May 2nd, Sarah Pierce from the MPI, the Migration Policy Institute, is a nonpartisan immigration policy think tank. She's going to be on the show, so we're going to get into details. And then it looks like Andrew Frawley, who I believe was employee number 2 in Yang 2020. I think that's Andrew. Yes. He's the one that came up with the math hats. He's going to be on the show as my guest next Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific. So make sure you subscribe and make sure you'll be the first to know, and hit that bell if you want to be the first to know when we have other guests coming on. With that, I'm going to say goodbye, nerds. If you haven't yet, please like and share, because nerd content does not sell itself. This is something where it is an acquired taste. All right. Good night, folks. Goodbye, nerds.